Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dimensional Fork in the Road Summit, where we are gathering with an amazing group of spiritual teachers, light workers, and wisdom keepers to explore the fifth dimension and the road ahead of us. This event is designed to open space for all of us to engage with our evolutionary choices and to offer a tangible vision as well as practical tools to forge a high-frequency pathway for humanity. So step into the sacred space with us and immerse yourself in the consciousness of the fifth dimension. Here you will receive inspiration and guidance to move through these turbulent times and anchor a fifth dimensional reality for yourself and for the planet. My name is Linn, and I'm your host and the creator of this event. And today I'm delighted to be here with Doug Buckingham. Welcome, Doug.
Hello, Heather. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us today.
It's my pleasure, hey?
Great. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about your topic. But first, if I may take a moment to tell our viewers more about you.
That's great, thanks.
Okay. Doug Buckingham is a transformational energy worker based in the UK. He's been teaching various energy modalities since 2006 and specializes in regression therapy and the journey of the soul. He has taught internationally in over a dozen countries and works at home in the UK and online. His passion is guiding people to being the best version that they can be by helping them to clear and let go of the past. Doug has a string of qualifications in the healing arts. He is a qualified clinical hypnotherapist, a regression therapist, and a life between lives therapist. He is a Reiki master and teacher in the Uzui method of natural healing, and a registered Karuna Reiki master, and a master teacher member of the UK Reiki Federation. He is also an Aurosoma Level 3 practitioner and a spiritual healer accredited with the College of Psychic Studies in London. Doug's first book, Gifts for Your Soul, Simple Healing Techniques for Every Day and Everyone, was published in 2018. Doug's topic for today is trusting your soul as the authority in your life. So Doug, you specialize in the journey of the soul. Why is understanding the soul's journey so important at this point in time and for our summit topic?
Well, I think it's always an important thing to talk about. I'm sure a lot of the people listening in have been actively working with the journey of the soul over the past few years, decades, whatever it may be. But I think the events of the past 18 months, 2 years, whatever it is, have caused a lot of people to turn inwards more than ever. I think a lot of people have said, what the heck's going on here? What's the meaning of life? All of those bigger picture questions. Yeah. And I think if you look at it from a personality perspective, you can't get very far. you move into places and spaces that we healers might rather not go, because you can look at one story over here and you can look at an opposite story over here, and there's a lot of emotion attached to these stories that we might not necessarily want to engage in. If, however, you can go to a different space or place within yourself and say, why has my soul chosen to incarnate into this lifetime at this particular time? Then, perhaps we can tap into the fact that something quite big is happening here on this planet, and it's not what you read on the newspapers, on social media, or even on the other forums that run. Humanity has an opportunity to evolve. It has an opportunity to move beyond its current realm of understanding, and I would say more importantly, perhaps behavior as well. And when we can look at that from an evolutionary perspective, I think it changes the energy of it quite dramatically. And one, it makes it easier to deal with what's going on in the outside world, full stop, end of story. But two, I think our soul we probably all need to recognize our soul as more of a guiding influence in our lives, or it would be helpful rather for all of us to recognize our soul as a guiding influence in our lives, and to reach out, to be more in touch with it for the resources to navigate us through these times.
Yes, that's so important. And what you're saying, it immediately puts us into a higher perspective, beyond the personality and the narratives.
Yeah.
So can you explain what you mean by making the soul the authority in your life? Is this the same or similar to the concept of a sovereign being?
Yeah, I think it's quite similar in a way. I think, if we look back at history, it sounds as though I'm becoming slightly political, if you like, but I'm just doing it to kind of explain what I mean. But, over the past few millennia, if you like, human beings have given away their power, whether it's to the owner of the piece of land that they work, whether it's to the church as the authority of how to connect with God, in more recent times, whether it's to a military leader, whether it's to a governmental figure, or to whoever it might be. We've actually tended to reach out for other people to connect us with what is the right thing to do. How do we move from here to where we want to go to? For me, none of these people have a clue. I'm being a little harsh at that point, but mostly they don't know why we're on this planet, why our soul has incarnated into this life, what we're choosing to work through. We all know that there've been some big questions that we've had to ask ourselves, big decisions we've had to make in the past 12 months. Is that something that we get influenced by from A or from B? Or is that much more of an internal, soul-led choice that we make at that point? And, that's really what I mean by, making the soul the authority figure, reaching into the energy of the soul, perhaps understanding through the journey of other lives how we've come to this point in the journey of the soul, and taking back our sovereignty, taking back our power rather than externalizing it. Sure, we're not really externalizing it to the soul. You could sort of argue that the soul is not fully present. And yes, I agree. But, we have a wealth of wisdom from other incarnations around us. We have a wealth of experiences. We have a wealth of probably times where we've got it very, very wrong, and a wealth of times where we've done rather well, thank you very much indeed. And if we can start to tap into those and be more present to those, then I think really that is the kind of power, that is the kind of authority that certainly I'd rather walk with in this world, feeling comfortable with my decisions based on what and who and how and where I am, rather than listening to what's going on out there.
Okay. Yes. So have you experienced many of your own past lives? And are there any that are particularly significant for you? And have these experiences and understandings changed your path in any significant way?
I think yes, 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 and yes is the short answers. The slightly
Sorry, that was quite a few questions altogether.
I remember them. Don't worry. Yes, I mean, I've been working with, just to sort of backtrack. I came into this life not really having a spiritual leaning as such, but always being open to the possibility. As a kid, as quite a young kid, I could, the concept of reincarnation, the concept of astrology, the concept of crystals, the concepts that we kind of all know and love, or at least respect in some way, were all sort of things that I was open to without really knowing why. And so I'm guessing sort of, for me, it was a matter of time before I kind of fell into a much more holistic, much more healing perspective within my own life. And one of the things that I was always very drawn to was the concept of past lives and the concept of regression therapy. I'd never even begun to contemplate the fact that it could be career, a job, or a calling, or whatever you call it. I just thought, that's rather cool, and I like the concept. When I got around to training as a regression therapist, and as part of the training, I had to go through a lot of my own past life experiences to, to start to clear some stuff out, to understand the experience, to be able to guide others on their journey. That for me is vital. I was also quite blessed that I had a sort of core group around me who were all in the same class as me, who lived quite close to me. So we did a lot of work outside of class. And one friend in particular had a very curious nature. So I was able to delve into a lot of my own past lives and past incarnations. And I guess there are, probably looked at about, 30, 40 over the years, in varying degrees of detail. I can safely say that, yes, there are a couple of standouts. I can remember one where I was a soldier. I was actually an officer in an army, and I had a spiritual experience towards the end of that life. I kind of had been quite good at fighting and killing and those sort of things, yeah. And at some point I came across a Sufi, or what appeared quite Sufi-like within that, and that was very much for me a conversion experience within a past life, and that was quite significant when I discovered that. And I think a lot of other lives, Egyptian lives are all, lives from that part of the world have also played quite a big role with power within me. And I think when I've worked with those, they have helped me to change the course of my life, to feel as though I'm able to express myself. That's another past life that springs to mind, one where I was in a monasterial type thing in France, where I was denied expression. As you can see, you're probably going to have to watch the time for me, because I'm inclined to talk quite a lot about these things. So, expression is something that I can do quite happily now, but that hasn't always been the case. So yes, I can safely say that I've looked at quite a lot of my past lives. All of them have influenced me to a lesser or greater degree. It's particularly the ones around power and the right use of power and expression that have influenced me personally and allowed me to, I would say, even be comfortable talking about stuff like this in a public forum. So yes, and that for me is the genius of past lives and regression therapy. It's not about who we were or what we did, although of course that comes into it. It's about how we can actually draw on those experiences, positively in the sense of bringing in the good ones, or perhaps less positively in the sense of having to experience the negative ones and release them, so that we can actually change who we are, not change, but influence who we are right here, right now, and maybe walk in a different direction or talk in a different way, however it is.
Okay, so
you didn't answer all of those questions. It did, didn't it?
Yes, no, that was a multi-dimensional question and answer, and
Yes.
actually partially touches on what I wanted to ask next, which is about, I often get the question as a healer from people, why spend time digging in the distant past when there's so much going on in the present, or at least in the current life? And in particular, why, for our topic today, why is going back to previous or distant experiences important for raising frequency and part of our evolution in consciousness?
Yeah, when I was studying to be a regression therapist, I remember I was looking for the last one of my case studies that I had to find, and I kept bumping into an acquaintance stroke friend of mine at the time, who I was sort of quietly badgering to be a case study for me. And, I think it was the third or the fourth time that I literally bumped into her quite accidentally. She thought, oh God, I've got to do this, haven't I? I'm being led to this point. And she had been suffering with an autoimmune disease for a few years. And, part of the reason why she'd rejected being a case study the first or second time I'd met her, she was, I've got enough going on in this life. Thank you very much. indeed. There's just too much to deal with.
Yeah.
And I had gone to pains to explain to her that often the roots of these things, or, I would say always the roots of these things, are in the past. And, it's not about digging up stuff to make our life harder. It's about digging up stuff so that we can get closure or a satisfactory conclusion or a satisfactory expression of it. We're talking a lot about vibration in the summit. And, I think what we can all safely assume, whether we've worked with it, whether we're about to work through it, or whether we're working through it right now, we all carry lower energy vibrations. Fear, of course, is the obvious one that's been a worldwide one over the past 18 months to a year. We all have a responsibility for that. And none of us can deny that, because we've created it in our collective consciousness. By going into the past and starting to work with and release places where we've held fear, where we've been unable to process fear, then we are firstly raising our own vibration by not carrying around all of that fear with us anymore, and secondly, raising the collective vibration. So, I think I think this is the journey of humanity. It's the evolutionary imperative, I believe, is to work through a lot of these lower vibrations. Earth is for me, it's a school where we come and we incarnate and we go through the love and the fear, the hate and the joy and all of the other conflicting emotions. However, there comes a point in time when our souls have got to the place where we can go, might have got that now. Now I can start to release some of that energy. And as a result, we can all, or those of us that are willing to, or those of us that have signed up to, we can all start to change our frequency, if you like, individually and collectively.
Yes, yes. So something that I've often wondered about is, why doesn't the soul at the end of a lifetime simply clear all the unfinished business from that life and then start afresh in the next life? Why do we just keep on carrying that stuff cumulatively? How does that serve our evolution?
The process is learning. And how do we learn? In a human body, we have to learn in a human body. Whereas on a soul level, we don't see things as right and wrong. We don't see things as any of the polarities that we could talk about at this point. As a soul, we see things generally as an experience, as they are. So when we pass, we kind of leave, if you like, our blueprint as it was unfinished, the soul's unfinished business from that life, and we may well choose to tap into that reservoir of unfinished business when we incarnate into this life, or perhaps the next life. For the soul, the learning is the important aspect, and if the slate was wiped clean, there wouldn't be that element of learning each and every time. There will be, although we may not always recognize it or actively embrace it, there will always be a nudge or a push or a pull from the soul in this life when we're getting near to our stuff. We may experience that as, or, whatever it may be. It may be the person that we meet that brings up that energy in us, or the situation, or whatever it is. But there will be there'll be that internal, whatever we want to call it at that point, that trips us into that area that we need to experience in a human body and work through in a human incarnation, rather than, let's say, spiritualizing it away in a way. So there's always that desire to get the experience, not right, but to have the experience in full, rather than sort of negating a bit of it, or spiritually bypassing it, or whatever.
Okay, yes. So do you believe that our souls choose the things we want to experience in each incarnation? So even something like an abusive childhood or the horrors of war, are those consciously chosen by the soul before coming in?
I believe so. And I fully appreciate at this point that somebody who's going through a particularly difficult situation in their current life may find that more difficult to accept and to embrace. I believe that as souls, we're never forced to do anything. I know, I've met plenty of people over the years who said, I didn't want to be here in this life. I was forced to come. For those people that I've worked with, I've always found that that's not actually the case. There may be a lot of reluctance within the personality to be here and to go through some of the situations that we have. But from the soul, it's an experience that is essentially neutral in many ways. When we talk about the horrors of war, when we talk about abusive situations, and we know from our personality perspective that that's awful. These things are just horrendous. Do I believe that the soul has chosen to incarnate into horrendous situations? Yeah, I do, because I think it's part of the experience. We're not only going to incarnate into areas where there is love and light. I remember, I can't quite remember whether it was 2004 or 2005, when the tsunami hit Southeast Asia. I think it was Christmas 2004, actually. And I remember doing some work with a group of us, and in particular, a lady who was an internationally recognized channel. And, there was, I don't quite remember the numbers, and I don't want to diminish it by getting the numbers too far wrong, but there was a lot of people who died in Sri Lanka in particular. And the lady who was channeling said, yes, all these souls have chosen to be here, and they've chosen to leave at the same point, because what this has unleashed within the world is a wave of compassion that is very much needed around the world. And so there's a bigger picture to death. And of course, what we're looking at as well, when we talk about things like this, we're in a human body where we die, full stop, end of story. However, the soul is eternal. The soul, death is something that we never really fully understood in our human, for most of humanity, has never really fully understood it. I remember reading a book about near-death experiences by a doctor or a nurse a few years ago, and she turned around and said, if only we spent the same amount of money on investigating death as we do in prolonging life, then the world would be a much better place. And I think, that's a large part of it. You can attribute a lot of things to a fear of death and to a finality. And, I don't want to trivialize anything, but we can actually put that that sort of theory or concept, if you like, into difficult situations that we embrace in the current life, or that we're born into. It doesn't lessen the impact of what we're going through as a personality. And as I say, I don't want to trivialize these things, but I do believe that there is a growth within working through them, although it's not pleasant as a personality.
Yes, and I think that's such an interesting point that you raise about collective choice. So, for example, with the tsunami and similar situations around the world. So, what would you say about what we're going through currently with the pandemic and the current levels of fear and anxiety that are so evident? To what extent is that a collective soul choice for humanity, if there's such a thing? Can you say something about that?
Yeah, I can say something about that. I've been talking about this for a while, and I sort of, there's a big this there, obviously. I think it's intriguing that there's 7.5 billion souls on the planet at this time, and that's what I've been talking about for a while, that there's a lot of witnesses. Yeah, and there's a lot of witnesses to a point at which something, humanity is going to change. That's what I've been talking about. To be honest with you, I didn't foresee it happening in quite this way, but who would? And I think that yes, I think it's an extraordinary, interesting time. I believe we've all chosen to be here. I believe we all need to tune into what our choices are going forward. As I said earlier, just coming back to the soul as authority in your life rather than externalizing it. And I have no doubt that, people have already left in numbers to move on through death. I'm sure that that's going to continue in some way, whatever way that manifests. But I do see that as being choice made. And I do believe, it's even when I take the view that, your summit, on some level, we've all chosen to be here. Whether it's you doing this and me talking to you, whether it's somebody listening to this conversation in California or, Borneo or wherever they happen to be, at some level, we've all plugged into that choice that we've made before us. It doesn't mean that all of life is predestined, because we have free will. They could say, nah, that guy's boring, I'll turn it off here. At some level, we've all signed up for this and for that and for whatever other crazy stuff we've signed up for. Yeah. So I see it as a collective choice, is the short answer to your question.
Yes. Okay. So then the next obvious question is, what are the really important choices we need to be making if we want to forge a high frequency pathway? In other words, to move beyond or through these turbulent times, beyond the fear, quite extreme fear levels that we seem to be in the grip of at the moment. What are the really significant choices that we need to be making individually?
I think you've got to look at life on several different levels. I think you've got to look at life on a practical level, and practical everyday level. We know where a lot of fear is coming from. It's the media. So for me, you've either got to eliminate your exposure to the media, or you've got to lessen it quite significantly, and then you're not going to get caught up in a lot of that energy. And I think there's many other choices around that. It can be also the people that we talk to, the people that we mingle with, not judging them or anything like that, but just discerning who are good people to have around, to be around, who kind of really help you to be you, and you help them to be them, if you get my point. So I think there's practical steps that we can take. I think also on an energetic level, I think we've got to clear our stuff. I think that's a lot of what it comes down to. I think however we clear our stuff, there are a lot of fabulous modalities out there in the world now that can work extraordinarily well for a lot of people. And I think the more we embrace whatever we can do to move through our misgivings, through our denser emotions, without spiritually bypassing it, actually engaging with it and realizing that we're much more than that. But I think conceptually, I think, it's always worth tapping into the bigger picture to understand that we are a multidimensional soul, we are eternal, and whatever happens in this life is just, as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and we're merely players on it. We are a player on the stage. And I think, a few of those things, and probably more, I think, the choices that we make to do this or do that, to be honest with you, I think they're largely, I'm not going to say they're irrelevant, because again, that trivializes them, but I don't think they're as a bigger consequence of the fact of recognizing us as multidimensional beings. And really walking that talk.
Yes. And I'm wondering if you work quite a lot with life between lives as well, as previous lives. Can you give us your views about what happens after death?
Yeah, I think, I think our belief system will, it's a complicated question when I think about it, but I think our belief system determines some of what we experience immediately after death. I think, for example, if we go to death in a state of extreme fear, then I think we may well manifest a situation in the very short time that is of extreme fear. I think it may take us a little while to move through that. I think beyond that, beyond the immediate manifestation of what our belief system creates, I think our energy, our soul leaves the body, and I think we move into a place of a different dimension that we could call the spirit realm, where we start to process this existence that we've just been in. If you look at near-death experiences are a great guide to what the soul or what we may experience after death, in the sense that we go to that place in the light. We may be met by guides or relatives or, spirit animals. We process the life that we've just lived. We may receive an element of healing. That's quite a good evidential based guide as to what happens immediately after death. But I think, I think it's very useful to sort of everybody anywhere to sort of get our belief systems into a row. Those people who believe there's nothing after death will probably have a spell of nothing, because our thoughts do create our reality to some degree. So it doesn't mean we're going to move beyond that, because our multidimensional self will, but there'll be almost like a reflection, if you like, of the personality that exists in spirit immediately after death, that will undergo the thing that we're believing in.
Yes, I think that's right. And do you think that there's some value at this particular point in time, with everything that's going on in the world, with people really understanding the death process, because that in itself might help to dispel so much of the fear of death that is evident?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things we could put out into the public consciousness that would be really helpful at this point. And, I think that's one of the premier ones. How we'd get it out there is another question, because I think, people fear what they don't understand and they're very resistant to it. But I think it would be extraordinarily helpful. If you look at, talking about death, it's quite acceptable in, Far Eastern cultures, for example.
That's right.
But for what we call Western culture, it's very much a taboo subject. And, I recently revisited the Seth material, and I'm sure a lot of people who might be listening to this or watching this may have come across that. And, that was 50 years ago, for God's sake. And that was really talking about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here today. How many people have actually opened up to that energy and that possibility? And there's a wealth of material there. Relatively few within the context of humanity. If one of our world leaders had a near-death experience and reported it on the news at 6 o'clock or whenever we have the news, maybe that'd be helpful. But otherwise, I'm not quite sure how we're going to get it out there.
Yeah, well, the more people that talk about these things, the more that frequency goes out and the consciousness goes out. So it's always worth it. Yeah. So, Doug, do you have any exciting or new projects or programs coming up? Anything that you'd like to mention to our viewers?
I'm always working with something. I run courses in the UK, and I do training in hypnosis, regression therapy, and life between lives. I've got a life between life course coming up in September, and then another one a year later. I run online courses, which are much more experiential. I regularly run Explore Past Life courses online. I run Explore Life Between Life courses online, or interlife regression, as I call it. I'm doing something, I'm not quite sure when I'm actually going to put it out there, but I'm doing something on sleep, but from a soul perspective, rather than just how to sleep better, how to connect with our soul that bit better through the medium of sleep and dreams, and really sort of, because we have an extraordinary consciousness while we're asleep. It's much more, in my opinion, much more refined than most of us when we're awake. So how do we start to tap into that? So there'll be something like that, which that'll be coming up online, probably around shortly after this summit, actually.
Okay, wonderful. That all sounds very interesting. And so if anybody feels moved to work more actively at the soul level and work with the journey of their soul, they know where to find you. Doug's details are below this video. And Doug, you also have a free gift for the viewers. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah. One of the things that I've done over the years, I've done a lot of audio recordings for various things, for hypnosis, for the soul journey. I think one of the greatest things that we could do, and I can probably have mentioned this for a question, several of the questions that you've asked, is to keep our energy clear. And not necessarily the bigger stuff, but I think also on a daily basis. And I just find this, for the people that I'm working with at the moment, more and more vital as time goes by. So what I'm offering everybody is an energy clearing meditation. It's a very simple one, but a very effective one. It's about 15 minutes and it's available on my website for absolutely nothing. That's the free gift I'm offering. And I hope that even if only one person downloads it and makes good use of it, that's great. If many more do, then that's even more fabulous.
That's wonderful. And as you say, it's so necessary at this time. And I think everybody can really benefit in terms of raising frequency by doing that regular energy clearing. So that's available. If you want to claim Doug's free gift, you can just scroll down below this video on the Summit site and you'll see the link. So thank you so much, Doug. It's been really great talking to you today.
Oh, likewise, Heather. I'm really pleased to have been invited, and it's been fabulous talking to you too.
Great, thank you. And thank you to our audience for joining the summit. I'm sending love and light to everyone.